Hi friends, welcome to iCoding Club. Today we're going to talk about React Context and this will be a master class. So we're going to discuss React Context at the level of beginners to the advanced level. Now React Context is a powerful feature in React that allows you to share state and data across entire application. Now since this is the master class, please look into the agenda. In case you are familiar with the basic concept of it, feel free to move toward the advanced part of it. I will try to provide the timestamp in the description section. So we will start with step 0, that is the basic unidirectional data flow. That has nothing to do with the React context, but we will try to build an Harry Potter bookstore and try to see what are the challenges we can have when we try to provide data in a unidirectional flow in a multiple component in the level of multiple components. And then we will move toward the actual React context. We will start with a very basic React context use case where we're going to have some user related data passed from very top to the bottom using the React context. Then we will use something like React Dev tool to see like how easily we can debug the React context. And then we move toward the advanced part of the React context where we're going to build a full-fledged notification framework using the React context. And in the last, we will going to discuss the React context advantages and disadvantages. Welcome to the React Context Masterclass. This is the first video where we're going to learn about, not about the React context, but we're going to learn about how the standard data flow work in a React application and what are the challenges we can have if it is a large application, right? So I called it like, the 0th video because we are not going to learn about the React context here and we're just going to do a simple data flow. But it's important to understand and observe while we kind of going to do the coding because that will highlight some of the challenges of standard data flow in a React application. And that will create the base of like why we need React context, something like React context and how it can be useful in different contexts. So let's see like, what we're going to do in this 0th video basically. We're going to have some data flow in an application called Harry Potter Bookstore. What we have is the simple web page with a list of the book. User can come here with a different role. Either they can have a viewer or a logged in user or an admin. And in case you have a login as an admin or user, what we're going to have is some kind of avatar at the top, right? With the image, name, and the handler. Depending on if you are an admin, you're going to get an edit button, or if you are a user, you're going to get a buy button. So we're not nothing complex, simple. A user data will be flowed from the top. If I just quickly show the high level diagram of the component tree, just to understand how things will be. So what we're going to do, we're going to have some user mock data. And it's important that we're going to have just a mock data because we don't want to go to complexity of fetching this data with the API. In this video, our job is to learn how the data flow happen and what are the challenges we can face with that data. So let's try to keep things as simple. So no data fetching, no styling, no React component designing. It will be just all about data flow. So what we're going to do, we're going to have a mock data at the bookstore app, and then we're going to pass it where we're going to require the user data. So the first place where we're going to require user data is basically an avatar, where we're going to show the user name, handler, and the image, right? So the user data will come here. And then second is basically the action button. So that will be here in the book action. So data will be start from here. It will come to the book manager. We are not going to use anything here. So it will work more like a pipe. Same book list. Again, we're not going to use the data here, and it will finally come to the book action where we're going to use this data, right? So let's jump to the code and see that how this is going to happen. What you see here, this working website is basically from the standard data flow final branch. This will be pushed to the main GitHub repo once this whole course is over. For this video, what we're going to do, we're going to switch our branch to the flow standard data flow start, where you have all the components, all the styling, all the types put together, but no data flow. That's what we're going to do in this video. How we can have the data from top to bottom and what challenges we can face. I also chosen the TypeScript based application because I want in most of the enterprise application nowadays we use TypeScript, and I want to kind of highlight the extra pain we can have when we use TypeScript with these multi-level data flow, right? And that's why the TypeScript is there, but you are free not to include TypeScript. The concept will remain same. Just kind of scaffold another project. Use React Create tab, white, anything you like, right? So let's start on our code structure. That how it is. What we have is the bookstore, where we have our main component, book action, list, and manager. We have the layout, where we have avatar and header. And then we have some mock data here, the books.json and user.json. Books.json, we're not going to use much here. This is basically, it's rendering all the books what we have just seen on the running website. User.json is something we're going to use next. So we'll start from the bookstore app, which is the top level component. So let's start with importing the user data. So it is in the data / user.json, and we will call it as the user, right? And what we're going to do, let's start building the header first. Let's finish it up, and then we'll go to the book manager. So in the user, to pass the data, we're going to have the user, right? And since it's a React application, it's complaining that, this is not part of the header component. That's why let's do something here. Basically, first let's pull the user, and that's something we're going to use it here. But again, this user data is not, we will not use in this component. So let's just kind of create the connection to the avatar, and let's put to satisfy the TypeScript error, let's have user and user, right? And this type user is actually coming from type.d.ts, which is here. And you can already see that, all the attributes we have in the user type, right? So let's go back to let's save this file first and come to the avatar. Now, similar thing here in the avatar as well. So we come to here, let's put it the TypeScript mapping. And now we have user data where exactly we wanted. So we already kind of traversed from multiple component, but just to provide the data to the actual place where we need it. So let's try to destructure it. What we're going to use from the user, basically the name, and we have let's see what we have. Basically, we're going to use the name, user ID, and this avatar, right? So let's come back here. Let's pull the user ID. And the third is the avatar, that is the image URL. Oops, not here, basically here. Name, and then we'll have the user ID here, and then avatar, right? So this kind of created the complete mapping from the bookstore app till it goes to header, and then finally reach to the avatar, right? At this point, we should have our avatar running nice and well. Nice, cool. So the first thing is done, and now let's go back to our action button, and then we try to analyze the challenges once more before we go to the React context. So let's go back to the code. Again, start from the bookstore app. Have the user here, right? And while I'm writing all this TypeScript one, you can see the challenges of passing the data, right? Even though we are not using in the component, we still have to do all these mapping. Uh, Probably like in the non-TypeScript application, the challenge is a little bit lesser, but in the TypeScript application, it's a little bit more pain, right? And that's, let's go to the book list and we put the user here and try to get the user from the props. Again, we already on the second level, but we are not going to use the user data here as well because this is all about book detail. So we need the user data in this book action component. So again, we are passing downwards just to get this user data into the actual component where we're going to need this one. Really, a little bit of pain, right? Yes, this I really wanted to highlight. So finally, with the complete integration, we got the user data into the action component, book action component, where we actually needed it, right? Now let's finish the code. Basically what we said earlier, that if the user is admin, in that case we're going to have an edit button. If user is non-admin, a normal user, in that case we're going to have a buy button, right? So let's pull the role from user, and we're going to say that if role triple equal to admin, in that case we're going to have a edit button. So let's create a button here, edit, and if the role is user, then you can't edit the book, but you can still buy the book. So let's have that in place, right? So let's see, right? We already got a edit button in place. And if I go back to our mock data and try to have user role and refresh it, yep, we have the buy button, right? So this is basically we wanted to do. And we have seen that, we already on the path that we discussed the challenges, that the fact that we only needed this data into the child component, still we have to pass these data from all the way from the top to bottom. And this is just basically like, 3, 5, 6 component application. And we already kind of felt some of the challenges. Imagine if it is an enterprise application with the 50 plus component, 100 plus component, where every other day new components getting added, few getting removed. Having this this mapping of the data is challenging, right? And wouldn't be like awesome, like if we can pass the data directly from the bookstore app to the component where we actually need it? Yes, it is possible, and that is why with the React context. So next video we're going to learn how React context work and how we can write in the code and how it can simplify our life. Hi friends, welcome to the second video and the first video in which we're going to learn about the React context. So we're going to start with the basic of React context, and I hope you have the application running in this state where we have the basic data integrated, because we're going to start from this state and then we're going to have the basic level of React context in place. So before we jump there, right, let's try to understand that what is React context, and then we will jump to the code. So let's duplicate this diagram and then we will try to understand React context. All right. So we already have these basic tree structure, and if you remember, we would try to provide data from from this top component to the childmost component. Now this is the one way of data flow in React, and this is the most famous one, right? Where we follow the waterfall model and data come from the top to bottom. We will go to the React context, which is the second way of data management in React. So how it works. So basically, the React context is basically a utility from React, which kind of handle the context data. It's set outside. It's more like kind of internal to React. Uh, we don't get exposure of it. So it is React context. Now with that, you can actually create multiple type of context class. For example, in this video, what we're going to do, we're going to create something called user context, which is going to hold our user related data, right? So it has, you can link to the any kind of data, and in that case, the user context hold that data. So if I call this user, right? So data is kind of integrated and is basically two-way communication. So you can get from both the side, right? So let's make that two-way communication, right? You can pull the data from that store, and you can also modify that data, that store. In the basic version of it, in this video, we are going to only pull the data from the store, and when we move to the advanced part, then we will see like how we can modify that data as well. So we already have user context. Now every React context actually give you uh, two more component. So the one is for any context, you will have, let's say in this user context, what we're going to have a user context dot provider. All right. And then we can also have something called user context dot consumer. Now, this is basically kind of a helper utility or helper class for user context. Now, this has some kind of magical feature to it. Think about more like kind of uh, if the traditional data flow is more like kind of a landline communication where you have wire from the exchange, then the sub office, then your zonal office, and then to your home, and that's how the data comes here. The React context is more like a mobile communication or the satellite communication. It kind of reach directly to where exactly you want. And how that work is basically this user can context provider is more like a satellite. You can kind of let it sit anywhere. If it sits here, in that case, all these components will get the data from the user context. If I put it here, then only this branch will get it and not this branch. And that is also true till the bottom layer, right? I can put it here, and in that case, only the book action will get the data and not these components. So what we want in this application basically to provide data to all the components, right? So let's put it at the very top. And in this stage, basically, what we have is data to all component, right? So let's call it, yeah, let's fill it, and we'll call it like hatch, right? Yeah, and let's put it back. So it kind of indicate that what is the jurisdiction or what is the area of this context, user context, right? And and basically, when I say that all these area, basically user context data is there, means like it possible to fetch the data on in all these component, but you don't get it by default, right? What you need to do is basically you need to fetch this data from this guy, user context consumer, right? And to do that, what we have is basically there is a utility called if I is usually called use context. Basically, it's a React hook which let you kind of pull the data from the context. So we call it like use context, right? And you can actually plug the use context anywhere in the component, in any component, basically wherever you say, like, you can put the your hook on that component, and that component kind of link to the use to the consumer, which internally link to the user context and which is internally linked to your data. And that's how the data can flow to your hook, right? Let me put this arrow here, right? Again, it's a two-way communication, and you can pull the data into book action. Wherever I need this data, I can have my use context. Yeah, actually, it's better to write. Basically, you have to write a use context, and then you have to provide which context we want to use here. So basically, what we want is the user context. So that's how it basically work. Now magically, like in place of putting all this mapping, now you have such a wireless communication or mobile kind of thing where you can actually pull the data directly from the source, and that's how it's actually reach to the component. So at the high level, this is the theory. Now let's move to the code and see how it's actually work. So we will start from our standard data flow final branch, and from this, let's create a new branch, right? We will call it like React Context Basic, right? Yes, it's the basic section, and we have the advanced section also next, which we're going to cover. So in the basic section, let's start from building our context. So if I go back to this map, what we need is basically we have to create this our user context first. So let's go there, and at the source, we're going to create a folder called context, and inside context, we're going to have a user context. Inside user context, let's create a new file called user context.tsx, right? And I can have a functional component, which we're going to use it later. The first thing what we need to create a context in React is basically called react.createContext. Now the create context take an object, basically is kind of structure of your context, right? So you can provide any data what you want. I can have my name, and that will also kind of work. But what we want is basically our user data, right? So I can have another import. We will go back to our mock data. So if we can recall from previous video, we have here in the user.json is our mock data, and that is user. And this is basically our kind of main object on which we want to create a context. Now the create context basically kind of return you the context. So we can call it like user context. All right. So user context, and this we want as the user context provider, right? And not the default export. Is there one of the export? So what we want is basically, again, if I go back to the diagram, is that we want to have a user context provider, and all these components will be like a child of this provider. So let's do that. So in the user context provider, I want a children, which will be the kind of child here, and this will be user context dot, yes, you're right, provider, right? User context provider. So all this thing, right? Now this is giving me an error that basically it required a value. Now what is the value is basically like what data you want. So in this case, we want a user, right? So in that case, this whole data, whatever we have the user data, is available in all the children. So this there, and then basically it's kind of complaining for the type. So let's put that quickly in the face props, and we want to have a children of type react node, right? And this will be capital props. right? So this is all good. Now what we want is basically this component should sit at the top in the bookstore app, right? So let's go to the bookstore app and try to pull React user context provider, right? And these two will be the child of this provider. Now this doesn't need this user data, right? So let's clean it up and try to kind of first clean up the header component, and then we'll come to the book manager. So I remove this guy here, go inside. I don't need my user data here, so I kind of clean it up. And then I don't need it here as well, so I clean it up. And then I go inside, and again I don't need it, so let me just comment it up. And I don't need it here, right? And now I have to ask context to provide me this data, right? The user data. So how we can pull the data from the context? Yes, we call the use context, right? So let's have a use context, right? And use context required user context, or the type of context from which we are fetching the data, right? So looks like we have not exported the data, not exported the context. So let's export this guy as well from here, user context. Now let's go back and see if we have, yes, we do have user context now, right? And this guy will give me const user, right? So this all are fine, right? Now at this point, if I hover on user, right, the type of this is basically the set of attribute, which is fine, but that's not what we want. We want the type to be user type, right? So we have two ways to do it. Either I can have my user type here, and in that case it will change the type to user, or even better, I can leave this one as it is. I can go to the user context, and when I create the context in the source itself, I can say it is the user type context. So if I go back to my header and go back to avatar and hover on this one back, so it says like it's a user type. So this whole structure, mapping is done. Our application should be giving the error at this stage because we have not kind of did the mapping with the book list. So let's go back to the bookstore manager, bookstore app, and then we will clean up the props here as well. And let's go to the book manager, comment it up, remove it, clean it up, come here, clean it up, and this is like, probably the second last cleaning. I can go to the book action, this, comment it up, and we don't need it from here, right? And to get the data, again, same thing, you go back to here and you can pull this data, and you go to the book action and then have your context in place. So let's import use context and let's import user context. All right. So if I go back to our application, now it's all working. So our data is back and it's all coming from the context, right? One more level of cleanup we can do. This is all fine. This is working fine, but we are unnecessarily exposing the user context here and then everywhere. If we change the name of user context, then we have to go and modify everywhere. So what we can do, basically, we can come here in user context and we can create something called use user, right? Again, you can name anything you want, use user context or use user, anything will fine. So use user.ts, and I can have my function which says use user. Now this will be a custom React hook. So what we can do, we can go to, let me just close all and go back to our avatar to copy this code. I can copy from here and put it here, right? I can either return it directly, I can return some of the properties if I want, or I can return the entire user. That's on us, right? And then I can have user context imported as well as user context. So both use context and user context is here. Now what I can do, I can go back to avatar, and in place of having the simple construct, which is like a use context and this thing, I can have use user. And now I don't have to expose my user context, or I don't have to expose the use context either, right? And this is all what we want. Let's go back and see if our file is working. Yes, it is all working fine. I can go back and update our action file as well. So where is our action here, right? And clean it up. All right, so that's it. Now if I refresh it, it's all working fine, right? So in this part of video, we will look further and see like how we can debug the context and context data, right? And to do that, React provided a very nice tool that called React Developer Tool. It does a lot of things, but we're going to use it in the context of React context. So install it, and once you install it, basically you can actually go and say inspect, and then you can go to the in the dev tool toolbar and go to the section called components. Basically it's the React component. Now if you have used it earlier, you know that it's kind of showcase the entire tree structure for you, right? What we can see here is that it's, in our case, it's we have the bookstore app and the user context provider, and then it's like a context provider for all the child components. But not only that, right? If I click on the context provider, I can also see like what are the value we have. So in this case, what we have is a John Doe and everything what we are displaying there. And if I want to modify it as well, right, this whole context data, I can actually do that. So in place of admin, if I go for a user and change it, you can see that in place of edit, now button is buy. I can also say John Doe to John Day, and that will do a change as well, right? So you can debug entire React context data by going to this dev tool, and in case if you're not expecting the data, you're not getting the data as expectation, you go and see the structure of your tree, component tree, that what is wrong and where it is, right? So it's really useful on that sense. That's it in this video. Thank you. Hi friends, welcome to this video. In this video, we're going to cover a few advanced aspects of the React context. And to cover that, we're going to build a notification framework. Now, before I jump to the code and the design of it, let's see on the React ecosystem. What are I mean, there are a few libraries which utilize the React context in a very effective manner. So let's see like how they are doing it. So first we'll go to the very famous library of React Router. Now React Router let you navigate from one page to another. It has incredible support to kind of work with a different navigation option. But the way it does it, basically, if you see, it's actually kind of utilize the React context. What you see here is basically they have the browser router, which is working as the context provider, And when they want to navigate from one to other place, they have all the React consumer utilities, all the custom hooks which we can hit it. For example, let's say if you want to do a navigating, though there are different way, but we are interested on using the use navigate. What use navigate does it is very similar to what we have covered in the basic part of the of this course, that it basically pull the use navigate, and with the navigate object you can do something like navigate to the URL. So you have the context provider, and inside that, using the custom hook and calling the context consumer, you can just kind of interact with the context. The another example is basic another famous library, that is a Redux toolkit. What Redux toolkit does it like? It let you modify the Redux store from your component, and again it utilizes the React context. So how it does it? It basically have the something called provider. Inside that you can have your store. And if you want to interact with this particular store, what you can do is basically you can call we can call basically use reducer. Let me see if I can find it. Yes. So you can have like a use selector, use dispatch, which are basically from the React Redux library, right? So that's how these libraries are effectively using the React context to simplify things and have the very nice, powerful mechanism to handle the data in React components. So following the same pattern, we are going to build something called a custom notification framework. Now let's understand, since it's advanced part and we're going to build quite a lot of thing in this video, let's understand exactly and create a mental model that what we're going to build. So I'm coming back to our website. So it just looks like where we finished. What we're going to build is basically when you click on edit, right, we're going to have a notification framework in our system. When you click on the button, it going to there's a notification which will slide in, and we're going to provide this data like you are trying to edit this book, and we'll provide the name of it. And we will have a cancel button. If you click on cancel, it will go away. Same way, if we click on this, it will basically say that we are trying to edit that particular book. And both the action and the name of book will be it will be dynamic depending on what you're clicking, it will appear, right? So to do that, what we're going to have multiple components in this advanced video. Let's try to first create a diagram just to understand that what we're going to create and where we're going to create. So let's duplicate the very first the diagram what we have, and we're going to call it React Context Advanced, right? Now we're going to have, as just like in our previous basic part, we're also going to have something called notification context. Right, and this will be we will keep it as more like kind of library. So we try to have some kind of code separation in when we're going to develop it, right? So let's keep a boundary for this, and so the notification context, just like our user context in the basic part, going to have something called notification context provider. And as well as consumer, but yeah, we don't have to worry about that right now. Now in the book, in our component tree, what we're going to do is basically we're going to introduce a notification panel, right here. Now this component will also be exposed by our library. So it will be pulled from the library, but we will decide where to put it. Now this will be more like kind of sibling of bookstore app, and it will interact with notification context. So just like in our basic part, we're going to create a few hooks. So one hook will be here from the book action, where we're going to click on the button, and that going to talk to our notification context, right? And this will be basically kind of modifying the our context, but we're going to have a kind of listener of this notification here in the notification panel, which will, whenever we modify, it will show. Whenever we click on cancel, it will hide. So these all will work together to create a notification framework, right? So let's jump to the code and see how this works. So we'll start from where we finished in the basic part of it. So let's first create a new branch with the React Context basic branch, and we're going to call it React Context Advanced, right? And as we discussed that we're going to create a notification library, right? So let's try to create some kind of separation here in our folder structure. So we're going to call a folder called libs, and inside libs we're going to have a new folder called notification. Inside notification we're going to have multiple components. So we will have a components folder to create components to keep all the React components. Plus we're going to have a hooks folder to keep hooks, and then we will have most important, that is a context. And then we're going to have a more like kind of index file to expose a contract to the outside world, just like what we saw in the React router and in the React Redux toolkit library, right? To start with, what we're going to do, let's build our notification component first, so that we can see that how it's behaving. So let's create a file called notification panel.tsx, just a functional component, and this will be our kind of main notification panel. So let's put a label here. And as we discuss, first let me import here, and then I will go like where it's actually going to sit. So /component/notification panel. Right. Now we could have directly imported these components, but since we are simulating a library model, and that's why we are keeping a kind of separation and trying avoiding any direct access of the file, right? So whatever you export from index file, only those will be available in our component, right? So this is a default export, so let's leave it here. Now we'll go to the bookstore app, right? And this is the place where we're going to have our notification panel, right? Since it's separate and separate from the bookstore tree, so we'll just keep it it's somewhere here, and we'll call it like notification panel, right? And inside notification panel, let's have one paragraph, and we'll say this is test notification. Right, so this is done. Now notification panel is complaining because it doesn't know or that some props will be passed to as a children. So let's try to fix that part, right? So we will create a interface props, and props will be children of type react node. Right, and then we'll have a children props. Let's put it here. Now at this point we should have our we should have our notification put together. What I'm going to do next is going to keep our VS Code and our browser side by side, because we're going to do some style changes. So it's better, like, we can see it together. So in notification panel is all done. Now let's try to build the just like a notification one, right? So let's say try to include a CSS file. So we're going to call it style.css, right? Now doesn't matter like what CSS framework you are using, is a CSS module or any React component, all those things are fine, right? So just to keep things simple, I'm just going to have a simple CSS file, right? And then on the div, we can have a class name notification. Right, so let's try to hide this, file structure for a minute, and I think I didn't save it. Yes, it's here, and yeah, this is here. Sorry, it went up. So what we want is basically it to be to behave it to make it behave like some kind of notification panel. So let's call it notification, right? And what we want is basically something. Let's try to put some background color, and we'll call it. We can pick anything. I go for this Alice blue, and we can have some height to it. So I would say like 10 viewport height, right? And then I can have let's try to keep this notification text at the center. So the one quick way to do that is like, you can say display grid, and we can say place content in the center, right? So it came at the center basically. Now we don't want it to be displaying in the normal relative manner. We want it to be coming at the top of the header. So we'll say position, and we go for fixed, and z index, probably I can put 100 for now, that's fine. Now it does it like, because we did not provide a width, that's why it's just taking the width of the content. So let's fix that. So we can have a width, and we will call it like 100 viewport width. Looks like with the size and color is all working fine. Now what we can do is basically definitely we don't want it to be appear all the time. So one way to hide the notification panel is to kind of move it upward, right? So to do that, what we can say transform and say translate y. On the y-axis, we will take it to upward, and how much we want to take it. Basically, whatever the size of the panel, we will take that height and put it somewhere at the top, right, above the start of the viewport. So the easy way to do that is you put like 100% and put like minus before it. So it will take the height of the panel and take it upward, right? So it's gone up, and in the code we will use a class which actually kind of bring it downwards. So in that case, it will be a show helper, and that will do a 0. So as soon as we do a 0, it will come back to its original position. And since this show and the notification will work together, what I can do, I can just utilize the new CSS nested functionality and say like only when the notification and .show work together, then it should be applicable, right? Now at this point, if I go to my notification panel and try to put it show, so it's appearing. As soon as we remove it, it just go away, right? So what we can do quickly, we can create a variable here which will show equal to true, or show equal to false, and we can have a class name, a variable, we'll say notification. Yeah, it is just a quick way to kind of create a class name for our component. And we're going to say only if show is true, right? In that case, we want to have a class called show, otherwise we want to keep it as empty, right? And then we can do, basically we can join with a space. In that case, it will more like kind of a class name kind of thing. So let's put it here, right? And what's the error here? That's okay, right? We can remove it, right? So for false, it's not showing. As soon we have true, it's showing, right? So it's all working fine. Now we'll jump to the main part of integrating this notification panel with the React context, right? So let's bring back this to a full screen mode. And what we're going to do is we're going to create something called a notification context. .tsx. And if you guys remember from the basic part of this video, to create a notification, what we do is basically a notification context, right? So you can recall it, what we want is basically react dot create context, right? So we can have react dot create context. Right, and we can have export here because we'll be needing it later. So in the create context, this is the time when we have to discuss that what will be the structure of our framework. That is like how we want to utilize this framework in our code, right? So let's come here and say, let's go create a interface, and we'll call it like notification props probably, right? And we can, inside this, we can decide what are things we want. So one thing we need is show, the to kind of hide or show the panel. So let's create show, and that will be a mandatory field, and we will call it a Boolean one. Now the second what we want is basically from our component, when somebody click on the button, we want to show the notification panel. So we can have something called show notification. This will be more like kind of a function which can be called from our component, right? Now what we want is basically, there are different ways it can be handled. Either we can provide a simple message which could be a string type, but the problem with this is like we will lose the HTML part of it, and in that case, if we want to have something like a bold or we want to provide some kind of action, that is not possible. So best way to do that is let's try to pass a React component itself, which we will render in our notification panel component. So we'll call it like node, and this will be type of react node, right? So no messaging, you just pass me the React component itself, and I will render it in my notification panel. Simple as that, right? Now to avoid this TypeScript error, what we can do, we can just put it here. Notification panel, and then this will be a void, right? So I see, okay, yeah, it's struggling for, it's saying like, it's not used. So let's put it here, and now it's all good. Now what else? So we got a show, we got a show notification. We also need something called hide notification, obviously, because somewhere at the point we have to decide to hide it also. And this will be, now this can be done in different way. in a simple application, we can just say like, whenever somebody call a hide notification, we clear out all the notification we are showing. And in most probably, in this case, it will just one. But in an advanced application, probably you want to link the node with some ID, and on the hide notification, you better pass that ID so that it only clear up that particular notification and doesn't disturb the other notification, right? But since we don't have such a complex requirement, we can keep things simple, right? And since it's not only hiding but clearing it up, so better name would be clear notification, right? Now this is all good. Now let's move further, and in case we will require more props, we'll come back here. So let's satisfy the initial value here. So what we can say is show false, and then I can have show notification, right? This will be a note, and we can just have the one, and then third one will be clear notification, which would be a simple function, right? Nice. So this looks like all working fine. Now the last job is to export this notification context provider so that we can utilize it in our application. So let's try to build that one. So I will say notification context, not notification context, it will be notification context provider, and this will not be a default export, it will be one of the named export, right? So what we want is notification context dot provider, right? Just like the basic part of this this course, we will going to create a provider, and it asks for the value, right? So we will have the value, and then we're going to have these all value. Now this will be a little bit different than the basic part of it, basic part of this course, because in basic part we had the static value which get passed from the top to bottom. There was no scope of modification of that value. Unlike that, in the advanced part or in the notification framework, these values will be modified. So we cannot use a simple object, but we have to use a state, right? So we will have a state show set state, and we'll call it use state. One more thing we want is that when somebody calls a show notification, we want to have this node also in our state so that it can be passed and clean up. So let's have a node and call set node, again use state. Now this node would be, again, as we discussed, it will be React node type, or it could be null as well, right? In case we want to clear up that node. So we got the second one, and then we need these two methods. So let's call show notification. Show notification equal to node of type React node, and it will say set show. Did I miss anything? It's all fine. Oh, sorry, it should be set show, not set state, right? So set show, and we will call it like true because we want to show the notification, and then we will have set node. Yeah, better first call it show and then set the node, because yeah, first let's make it appear and then put the content here, right? So here, and the original value of this will be false. So we got show, we got a node. Actually, we need a node as well as one of the props. So let's put it here quickly. Node React node, and initial value of node will be null, and right? So that's two things are satisfied. Now third will be the show notification method, and the last one is clear notification method. So let's create that one. Clear notification, simple method, and we can copy these two method here, and we'll call set show equal to false, and set node, we will clear it up to its original value, that is none. All right, so looks like this is what all the things we wanted to configure is all in place. Now let's try to link our application with this context. So first thing what we want to do, we want to, from this edit button, we want to call our notification framework, right? And before that, let's remove this red thing which is bothering me from some time. So we go to index and comment out the to do part. All right, so this is clear. We don't need the style, and we go to the bookstore and book action, right? Now, if you remember, we need two things. We need notification context here so that we can interact with context, and then second is the book name, right? So first, to get the context, what we need to do, we already have our user context in place. Sorry, not the user context, notification context in place, right? Now, just like in our basic part of it, what we're going to do, either we can use context directly in each component, or we can create some helper hook. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to say use, we're going to create a custom component to kind of expose the whole notification context. So we will say use notification .ts, and it will be a function, a custom hook, use notification, right? And what we want is basically we need a use context from React. And what will the parameter of use context? If we can recall from the basic part, is basically it will be a notification context. So let's try to pull the guy, notification context, right? And we can just return it for now, that will do, right? And then let's export this guy, right? And if remember, initially we talk about the contract from this library. So everything we're going to create in this library has to be exported from this index file. So let's import our hook. So hook slash use notification, call use notification, and while we are here, let's import our notification context and notification context provider as well, right? From dot slash context slash notification context. So notification context and notification context provider, and we can export these two also from our contract file. Now let's come to the book action. And in book action, whenever you click on edit or buy, we want to call our notification. So what we can do is provide a on click method here, which going to call something called handle click, and we're going to provide the value, whatever the action we want. So let's do same thing for the buy, and it will be buy, right? And this will be an edit, right? Now let's create this handle click method. So in the handle click method, what we want to do is basically we want to interact with the notification framework or call the notification. So for that, it's important that we first call the use notification. Now it return everything what we have put together in the context file. So if you can recall, all these are available via this use notification custom hook. So what we can do, we can pull whatever we need. So what we need is show notification, and we also need a hide notification. Show notification, clear notification, sorry, clear notification. And then what we want to do is in the show notification, we want to pass our component. So what we can do is we can have something called a div. Beside div, we can have a paragraph, and we're going to say you are going to, and put a action which we just pass from the handler. So action, and only possible values here is basically edit or by, right? So in place of putting the string, we can actually put like a dedicated value. So in that case, you cannot pass anything else. So you're going to edit or buy the book, and here we need the book name, right? So we have to pass it from the top. So let's come to the book list, and we have the title here, so we can pass it title as a props. Come to book action, we can uncomment our own props and say title of type string, and this will be a props. All right, so we got our title, so it's all good so far. Now what we want to do is like when this notification appear, or let's try to have this much, and then we'll come to the clear notification in a minute. So this is good. Now looks like it's all been connected. Only one thing is pending, that is to put everything under our notification context, right? So we will need the notification provider somewhere. What we want is basically like a sibling of it, so it will be somewhere at the top, right? So let's go back to our code and go to the bookstore app, and this is the place where we can pull our notification provider and wrap just everything, right? Doesn't matter where we put it here. Now we can just have notification provider and put the entire code inside, right? So seems all good. What's wrong? Looks like we missed. Oh, looks like we did not add the children here, right? So yeah, let's put that quickly. What we want is a props of children, and that would be of React node type, right? So this is another way to satisfy React. You can have like a inline interface or type. So I just take this guy and put it here, so that all our child get the blessing of our notification context. Let's go back to the bookstore app. So our error is all satisfied. Now after this, seems like let's go back to our diagram, and we have connected from the book action. We also have the provider. Now the only thing left here is basically on the notification panel, we have to listen back to the notification context. So let's go to the notification panel. Now these two values, basically the node and the show value, we need to pull from the notification context. So first, let's call use notification, and try to pull what we want, right? So first thing we want is the show value. So let's call it show, And second is basically we want a node value, right? Which we can render it. So I can clean it this up. I also no longer need these props, so I can comment and remove this one, comment our props, and take this node and put it here, right? Okay. So it seems like it's all being done. We have integrated, we started from the book action. Uh, Actually, we started with setting up the context, then we configured it in the book action. Then we updated notification panel to do the complete integration. Now at this point, if all is good, then we should get the notification properly, right? So I have my console open in case we see any error. So let's try to click on edit. Nice. So we are getting this. You are going to edit the book Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. And if I click on the other, it says the Chamber of Secret. All good. Probably I try to make this bold. So I go back to my book action, close other, right? And then probably title should be strong. And while we are here, let's make action also strong, right? So strong, so that both the dynamic part is just clear. Cool. So edit. Nice. So I did the book Harry Potter's Chamber of Secret and this all thing. So we have completed the integration to show a notification, but it will remain there because there is no way to clear it up, right? So let's do that next. What we're going to do is going to utilize the clear notification from our notification framework. Now, where we want to call this clear notification is totally depend on us. Basically, we can put a clear button at the top that will clear everything. It can be clear from some kind of cross icon, but just to have fun, right? And just to show the power of putting the node in place of string, how far it can take us. So I can actually have a button here itself. And we're going to call it like clear. And what we want is somebody, whenever they click on this button, we want to call our clear notification guy. All right, so let's go back and refresh our UI. Right, we have our button here. Everything is working fine. If I click on clear, it's hide it. Right, but one thing I notice is that it's not behaving or it's not coming smoothly, right? Looks like I kind of missed the transition part of it. So quickly, let's go to the to our CSS file and let's put a transition on transform, because that's the only thing changing. So we can say transform, and then we want to do this in, let's say, 0.6 second, doesn't matter, whatever you want to put it, right? So refresh again, edit, nice, cool. So it's coming slowly, it's going slowly. So it looks like it's all on the notification part is all working fine, right? This is what we wanted to be, wanted to complete. There's a one thing which I want to take further in this advanced course is that if you go back to your notification panel, what you can see here that this guy actually returned me the entire thing, right? I have a node as well, I have a show notification as well, and clear notification as well. Now, if you think about it, these things doesn't belongs to the notification panel. Notification panel, what it does is only care about the show and node. And same is true for our book action as well. Book action doesn't need node and the show value, right? So we also still have a scope to kind of clean up and do some kind of restriction on what properties or what attributes we want to pass from the our custom hook. So one way we can easily do is that in place of dumping everything what we get from the context, we decide like what do you want. So we can say the use notification that will be like from action or somewhere. We only want a show notification. Let's put it this guy here, right? We want only the show notification and clear notification, right? So we're only going to pass these two property from here. And what about the notification panel? There we need a clear and node. What we can do, we can have a different custom hook for consumers, right? So I can say use notification consumer, right? We can come up with a better name, but I think this will do for now, right? And I can have use notification consumer and then use notification consumer here, right? And if I go back to this, what we want is here basically the show and the node, right? So show and node. And what if I go back to my notification panel, it's already showing it in red because use notification doesn't return show and node, right? So what we want is basically use notification consumer, right? And then the error is gone, right? Now let's go back to our website. It's all working fine, nice and good, right? So this is how you can actually utilize, the React context and custom hook together to kind of expose the required data in a different part of it, right? So yeah, that's all in advanced video. Next, we will cover the summary of what all we have learned, that pros and cons of React, the advantages and disadvantages. So see you there in the next video. All right, so we have finished the basic part of the React context and the advanced part too by building a notification framework. Thanks all for sticking so long on this course. Now, since we are done with all the coding part of it and we understand the high level architecture, let's move further to understand some of the theory that when to use React, why to use React, and so on. Now, as we realize that React context is a very powerful feature that allow you to share the state across application, but uh, and we look into if we have to look into the advantages which we observe in our basic and advanced part, that is it's really simplify the props drilling. You don't have to do a complete mapping of the data from the top to bottom. That's really a win. We can use this as a global state management. So we have a single place for all the data and that can be utilized in our entire application. So we took the example of a mobile communication or satellite communication where the satellite has all the data and in the mobile you can actually access those data, that roughly like a React context. Now, third advantage we can put together is the improved readability. Since you don't have so much props drilling, you don't have to go up and down in the components tree. You can always just in your component itself, you can just see like what are the data we are pulling and that you can utilize it. And then you can also have the performance optimization because you can avoid like the re-rendering of different component because of the data changes at multiple level. With the context, the component will get re-render only when the context data changes. And these all are really a big win in a React context that can simplify your application significantly. But as we know that great power come with a great responsibility. So once we have all these advantages, there are few disadvantages, or basically like the part which you should look carefully. Now, the one disadvantage of React Context is like performance issue. If you have not done it right, you probably like doing it so many multiple re-render of your component, right? So that's something we need to be careful about it. Complexity. It is much complex than simple data flow from top to bottom. So that's something is another complex part of it. Now, debugging, we can utilize React Dev tool and other for debugging, but it's much harder than the simple React component. And we have to understand the React context as a it's basically not a full-fledged data framework, right? It is only used for some kind of global data in your application. If you really need a full-fledged data store, it's better to use Redux or MobX on those scenarios. Right? So these are the some of the pitfall we need to be aware of, right?